Welcome to the Ask the Geographer podcast series, brought to you by the Education Department at the Royal Geographical Society with IBG. I'm Rachel, your host, and in each episode I'll be joined by geographers from across the globe to delve into current events, publications and research, all tied to the fascinating world of geography. Today we are joined by a true adventurer and in many ways the original type of geographer, explorer Mark Evans. Mark has led numerous awe-inspiring expeditions, including a 49-day crossing of the Ras Al Hadd by foot and by camel, and a 28-day trek across the heart of Saudi Arabia. Today we are delighted to be talking to Mark about his latest venture, the Jewel of Arabia. This incredible 30-day journey will take Mark across most of Oman's coast, from Ras Al Hadd to Salalah, retracing the steps of the British explorer Bertram Thomas's 1928 expedition. Mark will travel on foot, by camel and 4x4, exploring Oman's diverse landscapes, sharing stories about its natural and cultural heritage along the way. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, nice to be here.
So Mark, this expedition sounds like an incredible venture. Can you tell us what inspired you to embark on this journey?
Well, Oman's been my home for 20 odd years. I've lived in the region for 25 years, but Oman has been the home for the last 20 of those. And it's very hard to spend time in the deserts of Arabia without becoming interested in those who've gone before, people like Wilfred Thesiger and Abdullah Philby, who in whose footsteps we followed 2 years ago across Saudi Arabia. But it was 8 years ago when two Omanis and I were lucky enough to be able to retrace the first ever crossing of the Ras Al Hadd, the biggest sand desert on earth, from Salalah north to Doha. And the person who did that first was a British explorer called Bertram Thomas, who did a journey in 1930-31. But the journey we're going to be following in January, starting in January the 6th, 2025, is following in the footsteps of a journey that Thomas did in 1928.
Fantastic. Yes, you just mentioned about his expedition. Can you tell us a little bit more about him as a geographer? He also was awarded the Founders Medal. Could you tell us a little bit more about that as well?
So Thomas was different to the other great desert explorers in that he wasn't born into the colonial service like Thesiger and Philby. He came from a very humble background. His mum ran the post office in a little village called Pill near Bristol, and his father was a pilot guiding boats up the muddy river Avon to make sure they didn't get stuck. So young Bertram signed up for the army, ended up in Mesopotamia. An incredible lady called Gertrude Bell saw a real talent in him for languages. And he was posted south to Oman in 1926, where he was asked to become the sort of financial advisor to the Sultan of Oman, Sultan Timur. And it's quite clear looking back now that when Thomas arrived, he arrived with a plan in his head to try and steal the crown and become the first European to cross that great sand desert. So a remarkable man. He did that journey in 53 days. It put him on the front page of every newspaper in the world, the New York Times, the Sydney Herald. It ended up with him being awarded the Founders Medal of the Royal Geographical Society, which had to be approved by King George at the time. So he was a remarkable man, but very much overshadowed by those who followed. Thesiger in the late 1940s, talented with the pen, even more talented with a black and white camera. Thesiger's images of Arabia are incredible, but he wasn't the first, and there can only ever be one first.
That's an amazing achievement. So when you're there, you intend to visit many of Oman's biodiversity hotspots. What makes these areas so unique, and why are they critical to Oman's natural heritage?
We came up with the name the Jewel of Arabia because I've lived in Bahrain, I've travelled around Qatar, I've travelled in UAE, lived in Saudi, and Oman really is the jewel because of this incredible diversity of life and this diversity of landscape. And I think it's the diversity of landscape that gives that diversity of life. And within 2 hours of the capital city, Muscat, I can be at 8,000 feet in my Land Rover, which means even in 45 degrees of heat in the summer at sea level, it's quite tolerable at 8,000 feet. And I can trek another 2,000 feet higher to 10,000 feet. So In certain parts of Oman, you have wild juniper and olive trees growing. In other parts of Oman, you have mangoes and coconut trees. You have this incredible thing called the Kharif, which is the monsoon. So for for a big chunk of the year, the southwesterly winds dominate the weather system. But for the other chunk of the year, it's the northeasterly winds dominate. So that movement of air and currents means, for example, that Oman has the only non-migratory population of humpback whales in the world, because in most other parts of the world, in every other part of the world, the whales have to migrate from hot water to cold water. Well, in Oman, they don't, because that water comes to them. They don't need to move because of the monsoon. And Thomas called his subsequent book Arabia Felix, and the Felix is connected to the word felicitation, so the welcoming, the bountiful, the friendly. And it's when you get to southern Oman on the border with Yemen that you come across this chunk of Oman that is kissed every summer for 3 months by the monsoon, and it's drizzly, cloudy, temperatures are in the low 20s for 3 months. It's green, it's quite extraordinary. You'd think you were in Africa. There are leopards and hyenas and porcupine and weaver birds with their nests under the acacia trees. If you didn't know you're in Oman, you'd think you're in Tanzania. And so it's all down to the geography. That biodiversity is explained by the sort of latitude, but also altitude.
Yeah, definitely. And it makes it an incredibly diverse place to go and visit. Part of this expedition is to shine the light on how Oman is moving away from a carbon-based economy to a more sustainable one. Can you share with us some of the highlights that you hope to see?
Yeah, so Oman has a strategic plan. It's called Vision 2040, which is sort of crafted and shaped by His Majesty the Sultan's government. They have a net zero target, like most countries. And as a move towards that, there really is, I've noticed, over the last 10 years of the 20 years that I've been there, a real move towards this, not just the word sustainability, because it's easy to patch that into your mission statement on a website, but there's a transformation in people's thinking and behaviour. So Oman has really gone for first mover advantage in the arena of green hydrogen. So solar energy in abundance, wind energy in abundance also. So huge investment now on solar arrays, both water-based and land-based wind generation to produce green hydrogen. Oman sees itself as a regional and a global green energy hub. So on our journey, we'll be visiting some of these amazing places, telling the stories of the leopards and the reed beds and the frankincense, but we'll also be visiting some of the areas which are going to be the sort of industrial hotspots of this green energy production.
Fantastic. And one of the other places you're intending to visit is an eco-tourist camp. What role do you feel ecotourism plays in preserving Oman's heritage while fostering that idea of a sustainable future?
Well, I would say the same as it does anywhere, not just Oman. I think, it was possibly Attenborough, I can't remember, but someone who said, the more people feel for a place, the more they are likely to want to do to preserve and to conserve it for future generations in a sustainable way. And so I just think the more people experience the incredible natural heritage that Oman has to offer, the more they're going to appreciate what Oman has, and the more they are likely to want to do something in terms of shaping their own behaviour, perhaps in terms of carving out a more sustainable future. I think tourism camps, expeditions like we're going to do, we all play a role in shaping people's behaviours. It's not just attitude, it's behaviours as well.
You touched on the fact that Oman's trying to endeavour to become a regional influencer in terms of green hydrogen. The world is becoming increasingly more aware of sustainability and to be thinking sustainably as well. How do you feel Oman is contributing to the global consciousness around this issue?
Well, I think it's challenging people's perceptions of the region. I know when we finished our journey across the empty quarter, so 8 years ago, we retraced Thomas's 1930-31 crossing, and the headlines in the Times newspaper here in London was how lovely it was to see that there's more to the Middle East than blood, sweat and oil. And you scratch away, there's a heck of a lot going on. But regionally, the headlines paint a different picture and they focus on a different element of what's going on in the Middle East. But Oman is, as far away from all that stuff as you can possibly imagine. It's like living in Switzerland in the Middle East. It's totally non-aligned, it's neutral, it has a policy of non-interference in the affairs of other countries. It's just a delight to live in, and it may not have the wealth of its neighbouring countries, but I always see Oman as a thought leader in the region. It's much more considered. It makes the best of what it has in terms of its human capacity, and I just think it's making the most of its geolocation as well on that southern tip of Arabia, with all the global trade coming down the Red Sea, going east to Asia. Oman is strategically perfectly placed to do what Oman's very good at, which is quietly, never in the spotlight, never in the headlines, quietly shaping the thinking and leading the way in terms of the thinking of other people in the region.
I think when you've got a world full of people that want to make a big noise all the time, then Oman's quite a great place to be able to quietly support people and change points of view.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, in terms of investment into the region, it's a country that is incredibly stable. One of the many lovely friends I have in Oman is the foreign minister, and he did a talk in Oxford not too long ago called Talking to Anyone for the Good of Everyone. And how refreshing it is to live in a country that doesn't see anyone as an enemy, everyone as a friend, and Oman talks to everyone. And for that reason and that stability, that historical stability, Oman is seen increasingly as the sort of gateway to Arabia in terms of investment and development. But, obviously what we want is for that development to be a balanced economic development, that diversification away from oil and gas, but considering and taking into consideration biodiversity and the environment and sustainability.
Yeah, so you've just touched on that, but we're trying to think looking ahead into the future. So what do you see Oman's vision for the future, and how can a country that has had a carbon-based economy measure or balance its economic development with the need to protect its natural environment?
Well, let's just hope they do a better job than we've done here in Britain, because I think where I'm sitting in one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world, and there are huge examples and numerous examples of positivity here, of rewilding and all sorts of great work going on, and it's exactly the same in Oman. That vision of being a regional and a global green energy hub is still alive and kicking. There's very much a focus on that, and I just think there are so many young people now. When I first went to Oman 20 years ago, I really was just aware of one young Omani working in the environmental arena. But now there are so many incredible, talented, innovative young people doing great work and challenging people's thinking about the future. I'm very aware that some organisations shy away from relationships with oil and gas companies. I believe if you're going to change things, you have to engage and you have to communicate. They're part of the conversation. They're part of the transition, especially in a country like Oman, which has been so heavily dependent on it. You can't just turn it on and off. You have to be realistic about these things and seek a reasoned balance. And Oman is very, very good at that. It's not a country that knee-jerks into anything. It really does think things through very carefully. And, it wasn't too long ago when we had the launch of the Jewel of Arabia here at the Royal Geographical Society with His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales and His Royal Highness the Yazid bin Haytham, the two sort of future heads of state of those. And, it was really pleasing for me to see a young Omani winning one of the Earthshot prizes, all to do with carbon capture and injecting carbon into peridotite, a particular rock that holds carbon for a very, very long time. So, that's just one example. And this is in a country with a very small population, by the way. Just imagine the size of Britain, but with 4 million people. So it's a country full of innovation and great talent, which really gives me great hope for the future being a sustainable and a balanced one in Oman.
Finally, how can our listeners support or learn more about the efforts to preserve Oman's biodiversity and promote sustainability?
Well, the place to go to is our expedition website, which is jewelofarabiaexpedition.com, because what we've tried to do on that, I think I call it an oasis of inspiration. So if you go onto the I think it's the tab at the top of the web page which says inspiration. Go on there, you will see podcasts from half a dozen of some of Oman's leading young environmental thinkers. Ras Al Hadd, who's the director of the Environment Society Oman, Dr. Salalah Al Harthi, who is the expert on frankincense, Taimur Al Saeed talking about the Nubian ibex. Just some incredible talent talking and sharing about the work that they are doing to protect and preserve Oman's natural heritage. But in a balance to that, I think we've also got the best of British, which is you've got people like Felicity Aston talking about the importance of data collection and basic field science. What is the role of expeditions in today's world? You've got people like Belinda Kirk talking to camera, a short video clip about the value of spending time outdoors for our mental well-being. You've got people like James Burrell from Kew Gardens talking about all is not lost, and the fact that young people today have got the tools and the ability to leave the world in a better place than they found it. So there's all sorts of inspiration to be found on the website, and you can also track us every day from when the journey starts on January the 6th. And there will be daily podcasts, and we've already started releasing podcasts on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So if people search Jewel of Arabia Expedition on Spotify or whatever platform you get your podcasts on, you'll be able to follow us there. And you don't have to wait till January the 6th because we've already started podcasting. Another way that people can find more about Oman and sustainability is by visiting the Royal Geographical Society education resources that are being produced by the team here at the Royal Geographical Society, which are focusing on all sorts of different levels of the curriculum, and that will enable teachers to really get engaged and young people to get engaged in what we're doing.
Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to hear about your Jewel of Arabia expedition and the incredible work that's being done in Oman to embrace sustainability and preserve its natural heritage. Your journey reminds us of the importance of thinking globally and acting locally. Oman is setting an inspiring example of how a country can transition towards a greener future, and we wish you the best of luck on your expedition and can't wait to hear more about your adventures when you return.
Great. Thanks very much, Rachel.
Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe to the Ask the Geographer podcast series on soundcloud.com or your preferred streaming platform. Dive deeper into the world of geography and stay informed with our wide range of resources, many of which are available for free. School membership grants access to even more resources, including online lectures and supporting materials for both teachers and learners. Explore our resources and discover our additional offers for education at www.rgs.org/schools.